Of the chapel to the footnotes page, he escaped from the pews, but he kept the rage. He sees apologists stumble through the archive stacks, so he tightens his tie, grabs the primary facts. He says, "Stand aside, saints, your story's a mess. You buried the lid in a footnote, I guess. If the past needs a lawyer in a rumpled coat, he'll quote your own sources line by line, note by note." ExmoJoe and the Moronic rescue, marching in to save your tale. He won't call your doctrine true, but he'll patch your paper trail. When the faithful fumble history and the spin begins to fail, ExmoJoe and the Moronic rescue, he will still present it better than the veil. He's allergic to halos, but he loves a good claim. Won't kneel to the prophets, but he'll spell their names. He can cross-examine your canon like a courtroom clown. Still, your timeline stands straighter when he's around. Media mods! He mutters that this ever was real, but your arguments, friends, are a raw bad deal. He rebuilds your defenses with a smirk and a sigh. Here's the strongest version, now watch it still not fly. ExmoJoe and the Moronic rescue, he corrects your own defense. He won't bear a burning witness, but he'll grant you common sense. When the faithful crowd the common threads with a house of cards and dents, ExmoJoe and the Moronic rescue, he will sharpen up your case, then question all your evidence. He won't pray for a whisper, won't wait for a sign, but he'll guard your chronology like it almost was divine. Truth first, team colors last, that's the banner that he chose. He will polish up your past, then drop the final fatal blows. ExmoJoe and the Moronic rescue, trumpets blaze, the records ring. He won't bow inside your temples, but he'll fact-check everything. When believers dodge their documents and the answers start to sting, ExmoJoe and the Moronic rescue, he defends you from yourself. What an oddly noble thing. Moronic rescue. ExmoJoe, saving scripture from you.
Have fun here at the Church of Korihor, a mission of the Church of Korihor, which is called Hellfire Agency. Just wanted to throw a quick disclaimer before I throw at you some secret recordings you have never seen before. I assure you, I know, because I have been trying to get other creators to take these recordings of one David Taylor, also known as Chief Midegah, no longer a chief, well, officially represented in his group, as I understand it, basically ranting and threatening people on a Discord server. Now, I did not want to come out with this. I didn't want to be the one. I have tried many times to get other people to take up the call and say, here is dirt, run. I couldn't. So I'm going to do something a little bit dirty here. It is not in my nature to just go, hello, Lisa, welcome. It's not in my nature just to expose people, right? I mean, No, that's a lie. It is in my nature to do, but I tend to not want to do it if I don't have to it. I want to show you something. Okay. Basically, if you don't know, we're going to catch you up as you go along. There is a man named David Taylor. Some Mormons, some fringe Mormons have believed for some time that he was a kind of prophet to the nations. He was often compared to Samuel the Lamanite. We're going to just catch up on that. I want to show you some recordings. If you've followed the story, you've probably seen a lot of updates. I am going to include some of those. But I just want to show you a few things while I'm here, just to get this nasty business out of the way. Okay, when I say computer, please upload the video. I mean upload it now. Right? It's in Korahor. I'm gonna get better at this. You mind me now. Hear the prophecy now. I will get better at this, and at that point, I will have figured out a way to do this without StreamYard. Okay, here we go. This is from a video I plan to never release anywhere else, but to show you just a sampling of this. So you're about to see some recordings from a Discord server that belongs to Zion Media. I want to preface this by saying that the people at Zion Media are among the sweetest people I've ever interacted with. These are Mormons who really, I believe, are trying to return to the origins of Mormonism and the excitement of early Mormonism, because they find solace and comfort in the idea that God has, representatives on the earth now, and that they are not just old men who had inherited that position, that they are in fact people who want, that they are in fact good, and that they are men or persons or individuals who are inspired by God. They want to believe it again, and I don't blame them. A lot of modern problems in this world, even for a scripture as new as the Book of Mormon, which I would put to you is very new. In terms of scripture, it's a very new scripture. The Book of Mormon is just not relevant. And for a church that claims to have modern prophets, the Mormon church just doesn't really speak to modern issues of modern times. And that's why they're now polling their members to find out, I don't know, what do you think? But neither here nor there. We're going to give the Mormons a break, and as long a break as they need to say, is this the behavior of a prophet? Now, I just want to say again, before I start, this is Midegah. He had taken a brief, this man, David Taylor, had taken a brief hiatus from this Discord server. They did not know that I recorded any of this until just now. I have not revealed that to anybody at Zion Media. I was very careful not to include anything that compromised the sensitive subjects that go on in that Discord server, which I am now currently still a part of. I'm not trying to shame the things that the Mormons in Zion Media believe. I simply wanted to say, this is where this guy David Taylor came back into this Discord after a short hiatus, apparently because, well, I don't know this for sure. It's given to understand that he had said something angry, as he often does, that got pulled down, or some kind of conflict inside this Discord server that made even the people who are promoting him and his work as being a revelation, the guy who's revealing the new scriptures, the new Book of Mormon, if you will, made even those people like Shane Baldwin and his etc. to say, hey, guy, you got to calm down, because we're getting complaints from people. They were still on his side, which is the point. That's the thing that really made I started to observe this and say, I'm really concerned. And then within a few months, we saw that concern was valid. And I'm still concerned. Hence, I tried to get Steve Pinecker to release it. I didn't expressly say that. I just wanted to say, hey, would you like to see a link, a YouTube video that is unlisted, that you can't find anywhere, to David Taylor ranting at people? And you can use it however you want. And he didn't. And then he, just in revealing a few simple details about David Taylor. He found himself at the, being threatened with lawsuits and so forth. Anyways, we're going to get more into the story as much as I can. And then I hope to save as much time as possible towards the end to go down memory lane with you to about a year ago when I did an interview with Dr. Anton Troyer. And Dr. Troyer, if you don't know, well, we'll get into that. And then hopefully leave it on a more positive note and not just pick apart other people's beliefs. So here we go.
Hey, Midegah here. I am back on the Discord. Did you miss me? Hey, I did find out that they're going to try to do some expose that prior to 2018, I never had any interaction with Native America. Well, first of all, when my grandmother called me in 2018 to be a headman, I've been a headman since 2018, and I've done the best I could, regardless of the gaps I had to fill. However, it's not true. Prior to that, I first had encounter with tribal peoples growing up in the Nez Perce County, in the Nez Perce Indian Reservation, in a community that was just white people and Indians. So that was where I first encountered it growing up. Secondly, the first time I was in a ceremony was when I was 16 years old, and it was at the Lapwai Indian Reservation in the lodge of David Scott. His brother H.A. was my elder, and Francis Eaglehart Cree and Jimmy Greatwalker used to come over from Turtle Mountain, and they used to go up there for the sun dances. I was just there today, and they remember me. I went there when I got out of Afghanistan in 2012 to try to get help with some struggles I was having. And then in 2013, when I got out of the Marine Corps, I spent 6 months there with Dave Scott's brother, H.A., and just kind of, got my mind right. So it's nonsense to say that prior to 2018, I had no experiences or understanding. Yes, I did. My brother, on the other hand, or sister, whatever you want to call, the first time ever came to lodge in any regard was February 10th, 2018. So it's weird how some things are being projected on me that relate to my brother and not me.
Quickly before we go on to the next thing that they think. So you actually got a little taste there of the story that David Taylor just tells over and over again. Okay. As far as I know, David Taylor really is the son of a Jack Mormon woman. That's what we in the ex-Mormon Mormon community call a Mormon doesn't really practice, and an Ojibwe man. My understanding, again, from interviews with David Taylor, who is sometimes called Midegah and or Chief Midegah, even though he apparently, as we learned recently from Steve Pinecker at Mormon Book Reviews, that he has been informed by letter that he is not to identify himself as a chief of the Pembina tribe or anybody else, or which, as far as I know, he never did with anybody else. So he really shouldn't be called Chief Midegah. And there are lots of people who I think would suggest he never should have. But in any event, so you got the little dosage here. When we get around, hopefully we do get to going down memory lane, talking about my conversation with Dr. Troyer, who is an Ojibwe man who writes books on behalf of the indigenous peoples of the Americas and understanding indigeneity as it is in America, bridging the divide between indigenous peoples and non-indigenous peoples in the Americas. It's going to be very important what you just heard, where he talks about I learned under so and so. I learned under so and so. I was authorized with this. I had this moment where I had gone to the brink. This is a very Christian, very Western society understanding of authority and of the ability to speak on behalf of a group. Is that I was ordained under the hand of who was ordained under the hand of. I spoke, to the belly. I was belly to belly with this person. I shook the hand that shook the hand that shook the hand up. It's a very Western tradition, very Christian tradition. In fact, yeah. Anyways, let's go on from here. And you can see how this is two conversations. This is two recordings in. He liked to do video and audio recordings. I think this is actually going to be one of the last video recordings. As he starts to post more audio recordings, it becomes pretty clear that he is not happy.
So it's time for an update. I found out that there's groups out, surprise, surprise, there are groups out there that are trying to expose Midegah. Hey, listen, that prior to 2018 and being called by my grandmother to be a headman, I had no interaction with Native America. It's absolutely nonsense. My first interaction with Native America occurred in the early 90s when we were in California we grew up in the Nez Perce County. And so when I was a teenager, my first encounter is running from Lewiston, Idaho out to Lapwai, where my friends lived, and hanging out with my friends in Lapwai. And so it was the lodge of the Scott family. And David Scott actually set up that lodge, and I sweated with his brothers and HA. And I would, I think I started about 96. I was a junior in high school. And a couple years prior, I had first met elders related to William Commanda when I was running on a beach in California. But so my first sweat lodge was in 95, 96, and it was at the Scott family sweat lodge out in Lapwai, Idaho. I last was there today. I was out there today and talking with them, and on Wednesday, we're going to have sort of a reunion of sorts. I'm going to be there with his brothers, and I'm going to do a video and talk about it. When I got out of the Marine Corps, or back from Afghanistan in 2012, I went there and sweated with them. When I got out of the Marine Corps in 2013 and I moved back to Lewiston, Idaho initially, as I was in the reserves for 2 more years, I was out there with my friend Lacey Anderson and sweating there as well. So this notion that prior to 2018 I wasn't involved with tribal stuff is ridiculous. It's dumb. So on Wednesday, I'm going to be out at the Lapwai, Idaho, at the capital of the Nez Perce Indian Reservation, the home of the Nimipu, who are the Western Ojibwe. And I'll be at the original sweat lodge that I first went to. And we'll be doing a little video conversation with my very first elders I had in Lapwai, Idaho. And that from, let's say, 96 until 2013, kind of, what is that?
Any of it. We're going to get ahead of this. So now you're going to see this is pretty par for the course for David Taylor. He often will elaborate. He'll start with this story about how he is this man who came from a rough background, but grew up in Nez Perce County and among indigenous people and white people in Idaho. And then eventually he'll get to that he studied under William Commanda. If you don't know, William Commanda is one of the most well-regarded, one of the most revered elders in the history of the Ojibwe people. Apparently, he'll tell this story that David Taylor was, a teenager running down the beach in California, and William Commanda called him over, or one of his staff. I don't know what the correct term would be here, and that's my ignorance. Called him over and basically took him under his wing, and that's how he comes to be readopted into the Ojibwe peoples of his father's ancestry. This whole story, again, when I brought this up with my conversation with Dr. Troyer, he said, here's the issue. He said, in indigenous traditions, you don't do that. You don't name drop people that you studied under. In indigenous or people who ordained you or people who put you in such a tradition, he said that's a red flag really right there. And I don't want to put words in Dr. Troyer's mouth. I'll show you. He was very generous, and he tried very hard to not call David Taylor out. He's like, I don't know this person. I never heard of them. This whole thing started when I contacted Dr. Troyer in a kind of Hail Mary pass to say, forgive me for saying it that way, but to say, Dr. Troyer, have you ever heard of this guy, Midegah? Have you ever heard of this, that his claims about the Book of Mormon are true? And he emailed me back and said, I have no idea who that person is. Couldn't tell you anything about them. He said, and the Book of Mormon, doesn't that claim that we're from the lost tribes of Israel? And I said, and he said, because that's ridiculous. I can talk about that all day. And within about 3 or 4, I had sent him a few videos of David Taylor's conference they held with Zion Media in, I want to say, Wisconsin. I may be remembering that wrong. But that I sent him a few of these, these videos, these live streams where frankly went off the rails with the Michigan relics and blah, blah, blah. I mean, just pseudo-historical, pseudo-scientific nonsense. And he hardly looked at any of them before he said, "Yeah, I clicked on." I think he said, "I clicked on one of the videos and saw everything I needed to see within a couple of minutes. This is not true. None of this is true." And so I begged him for an hour of his time. This is a man who's written whole books on this. One of the ones I recommended in my episode, you can still go here on Hellfire Agency and watch the whole episode. It's an hour long. And I published the whole thing, no edits. But one of the things that he wrote that I highly recommend, and I highly recommend especially the audiobook if you're an audiobook person, is everything you ever wanted to know about Indians, but were too afraid to ask. It's an eye opener, especially, most of us I think are not nearly well educated as we should be about indigenous peoples here in this continent. I learned so much from that. And then he, of course, this is a man who graduated from Princeton, teaches at Bemidji State University, teaches Ojibwe, has learned Ojibwe as an adult man who grew up among Ojibwe culture. If you hear me say Ojibwe, Ojibwe is the original, are the people who are commonly known, mispronounced as Chippewa Indians from the Great Lakes region of the United States and Canada. And they very likely, I think, are related to the people, the mound builders that the Book of Mormon is based upon, the stories that the Book of Mormon is based upon. There's lots of theories about this. I happen to be partial to Dan Vogel's claim. Dan Vogel, call me out here if and when you see this. Is this or is this not your claim that Joseph Smith was inspired by the mound builders to come up with the story of the Book of Mormon? Yes, that's right. Joseph Smith made up the Book of Mormon, I think, personally. In any event, but then he likes to layer in his story about his time in the service. No reason why he shouldn't. And then it starts to get off the rails as he starts to hear these rumors going around about him, which, he does a lot of moving from community to community to community. And then the stories, catch up with him, which is the way that it works with charlatans. I'm just going to go ahead and say this. If I get a lawsuit, I get a lawsuit. But I'm here to tell you, I'm in good company if I get a cease and desist from David Taylor. But anyway, it's about the Great Lakes region. Anyway,
that's a pretty good swing there. That was interacting with him. So that's that.
However, I do want to say this idea that he never interacted with tribal communities before seems to be the criticism, I think, from within the Mormon community. He does seem to have had quite a bit of exposure inside indigenous communities. He posts videos and pictures of himself inside lodges and inside cultural centers and with people. I think I don't know that he, of course I didn't know him or I heard of him before 2018, so I can't say, maybe it is all new. However, the things that really become toxic, I want you to note here, is he brings up his sister. His twin sister is trans. She is a poet. And I can tell you from contact with people in the Mormon creator space, in the ex-Mormon creator space, that she has actively reached out to various creators. I'm not one of them, but I know she has reached out to others to say that David Taylor never used to speak with an accent or with a voice that sounded so indigenous, that's an act that he puts on to make himself sound more authentic. That he was not actively involved in the tribal communities. As far as I know, that does appear to have come either from his sister, from his twin sister, or from other people in the community inside the LDS fringe Mormon community, shall we say. So not criticism from anywhere else outside.
That. Talk to you later. But anyways, hey, newsflash, there's people just won't stop. They're missing the point that it's not about me. It's about the Nephite record going into the Yucatan and the Amazon. And why people are fighting that, I have no idea. But take care.
Okay, I do. So basically, to catch you up, last year, David Taylor had said that he was going to release the red metal record. Hopefully, I get a chance to go over this interview with Dr. Troyer because we talked about it specifically. That he claims that going back in, throughout the history of indigenous peoples and particularly the Ojibwe, that there are these birch bark scrolls that tell the record of the whole world, and that they tell the story of the Book of Mormon, and that they tell the story of the Ten Commandments and of the Pentateuch. That everything that's recorded in the Bible and the creation story of of Genesis and everything, that it's all in the indigenous records. And that he was going to have a big event where he was going to announce it, and that big event seemed to keep getting pushed back. Oh, it's going to be soon. 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 And it didn't happen until this year, 2026, that they finally released this record. And frankly, it's I never expected it to be good, but it's especially bad in my opinion. My opinion. And I don't know of anybody who gives credence to any of this story. Eventually, he wound up releasing it as an app together with a Mormon. Be gentle, Joe. Be nice. A Mormon fringe content creator, and or conspiracy theorist type person by the name of Brian Nettles. Google is your friend. Eventually, they wound up releasing the app and telling people that in order to use it, you had to, because this whole time you'll see it coming up again and again, that he's going to claim, and we're releasing it to the world. We're not even going to make you pay for it. And then when they actually released it, they did an event where they released it together, Brian Nettles and Midegah. And Brian Nettles said, okay, so you are going to have to pay $10 a month in order to get it. And that seems to me to be the point at which the last stragglers of people who really think that David Taylor is some kind of modern prophet, some kind of Samuel the Lamanite. We'll get a chance to talk about that here in a minute. That's when people started to really abandon him. That combined with that and his suddenly going on these long crash out rants about all the people he's going to sue their ass off, or that he's going to that he's opposed to in some way. Even let's have some more of these recordings, because aren't you having fun? Oh, let me point out, these are pictures posted by David and Taylor in the Discord server. David, Sir Midegah, friend Midegah, Your Holiness. I included these so that you can show. These are pictures of him with various tribal persons, apparently from Nez Perce. I don't recall off the top of my head, but this is part of his proving that he has contact with indigenous people prior to 2018. How this is proof of that, by the face of the person that I'm looking at here, seems to be the same person I was just looking at. But okay, same person. Was this prior to 2018? I couldn't tell you. So let's give it another recording.
Hey, listen, here's the deal. I got a twin, and my twin is most likely in this chat, and my twin is most likely communicating with everybody with fake names. I'm not going to be, if this is Midegah here, I'm not going to be a part of Discord unless the people who are in here and whoever moderators that are doing this, you should have to validate who you are. If you can't validate who you are, photo ID or something, then I don't want to be here. So I'll see you guys later. Because these fake profiles and this fake use and this fake trying to seek out, then trying to use against me, I don't care. Guess what? I'm going to just tell you guys again, okay? I have 2 divorces. I was a Marine.
Okay, 2 toxic points. At which point that David Taylor is about to crash out, which is what the kids say these days. I don't know. I asked my 15-year-old, is that what the kids say these days? And he's like, what kids? I'm like, the cool kids. And he said to me today, he said, cool kids according to whom and in what context? And I'm like, all right. I said, you're cool, Elijah, because you are smarter than most people who are grown adults. Anyway, he brings up his Marine service. He brings up his relationships, apparently a kind of sowing wild oats time period in his life. And he brings up the gender expression of his twin sister. And this eventually, I haven't included it here. I think I have a recording somewhere. Who cares? I wouldn't show it even if I did have it. I recorded it and said, this is so disgusting. I don't think I'll ever use it. He had a whole live stream months after this, at least weeks, if not months after this, where he apparently became so upset about his twin releasing information or working behind the scenes to discredit him and discredit his claims that he misgenders her. He accuses her of being a deviant. He basically starts dragging up until this point. As you can see, he seems to be not pretty respectful. He at least seems to observe the boundary of not misgendering his twin. And as he gets angrier, that goes away and turns into straight toxic masculine transphobic crap. And so trigger warning about that. This is going to get more. At the same time, he starts to talk about he was in the military. Okay, we already knew that. No reason to keep bringing it up. Not sure why it's relevant. Then he starts to tell about why it's relevant. He tries to get ahead of the rumors by just saying, yeah, you're going to hear about the time when I was in the military. I was in the military. Marines, this is how we are. And then that's what you're about to hear. I'm sorry. I considered not even releasing this. In fact, I may yet cut some of this short. This is going to get a little personal. But if you don't want it out there ever, David, Mr. Midegah, Sir Midegah, don't put it up anywhere if you don't want it released. So this is where David Taylor reveals a lot more about himself than I think he generally wants to be known. Here we go.
And I was a crappy husband because I was a Marine. I wasn't there. She was a Marine too, and it worked while we were Marines until it didn't work. And then it didn't work. Okay? She slept with my bishop. Whatever. Who cares? She's a great mother. It didn't work out. I was single for 5 years. And for 2 of those years, I might have dated 100 people. Get over it. If I wanted to date somebody every single day of my life, I'll do it until I find my soulmate. Okay? People can just, if they think I care about being feared into being one way or the other, screw you. Number 2, I fell in love again. And I had children, and a German woman who had never been outside of Germany came to the U.S.
Could I just say this before I start to get lumped in with some of this criticism that apparently David Taylor has, caught wind of behind him? I just want to be the sex positive person who comes in and says, if any of this story is true, good for you, David. I mean, can I be the first person to say, like, your wife slept with your bishop and you're happy for her because now she has a family that she wanted, and you acknowledge that you were toxic while you were steeped in the toxic masculinity of an Afghanistan deployed Marine. Hey man, good for you. You've done some healing there, apparently. Apparently could be more. You know what? Me too, man. I wish you nothing but the best of luck in healing through that. I wish you would keep that kind of open-minded energy about your twin. But it seems like sometimes you do try, and I commend you, and I don't expect you. I commend you for that, and I don't expect you to be perfect overnight. Okay, Ex-Mormon here, one Exmo to another, because he has apparently been either resigned or excommunicated from the LDS Church, which he refers to as the L-DS Church, which frankly. I hated it when he started doing that, but it is fair. I mean, that is fair. There is another Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints with no hyphen in it, who claimed to be the heirs of the legacy of Joseph Smith and the original Church of Christ. And frankly, I don't see that their claim is less valid. So here we go. Let's keep going.
For 5 years, not that it's any of your business. And she missed her family, and she went home for the first, and we had kids, and she went home for a wedding and fell in love with her high school boyfriend and got pregnant. Whoop-de-doo. I came to Germany and I didn't take the kids from her, and I fought to be a dad, and I had them 50% of the time for 5 years until it was time to migrate back. Who cares? It didn't work out. They've got a beautiful son. They've been together longer than I was with her. Who cares? I was in the Marine Corps. I was a part of a lot of people dying in Afghanistan. There's nothing that you've done or anybody's gonna like try to pin on me that's worse than that. And I accept it, even though they say, oh, it's the government, blah, blah, blah. I still was a part of it and I accept it. But you know what? I was baptized and it gone away. So unless you don't believe in baptism and unless you want to keep judging people by their mistakes and you don't believe in that repentance matters, which is sort of the feeling I'm getting from a lot of Latter-day Saints.
Okay. Before you prejudge, he's about to get plenty toxic and deserve and start earning a lot of that criticism here. Already, as you can tell, it's starting to get. He starts to lose his temper. And look, as an angry man myself, who has had to rein in my anger, I get it, man. There are moments I had, in fact, there's this moment where he had posted this thing about Stephen Pinecker in Mormon Book Reviews. It was a friend of the program, been on our show. Very grateful to have Steve on. Love to have him again. He posted this thing about Steve that went really toxic, angry, and even I can tell you from phone conversations I've had with Steve, where I could tell that it was not fake. It was not for the show. It was not for his show, which very little of the emotion that Steve shows is just for the program. He doesn't play the role of somebody. He wears his heart on his sleeve. He goes out there and he shows his real self a lot when he feels it's appropriate. And Steve was scared. I mean, there was a moment where Steve was worried that Midegah might attack him, try to hurt him, sue him. Steve doesn't have a lot of money or anything like that. And so he was like, what do you think I should do? And I was like, I can't imagine Midegah's actually going to come after you, especially if there's no money to come after. I'm like, why isn't he suing the Church of Jesus Christ? Why isn't he suing the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, dash or no dash? Why isn't he suing any of these other people? And he's like, maybe he is. I said, maybe he is. And in which case, I guess you lawyer up and you tell him. I said, look, I've never been an attorney. I'm not an attorney. I can't give you legal advice. That being said, I got into video production when I was 15 years old, and my teacher, it was me doing my Western thing, I learned under the hand of Mike Jones, yes, the same, digital video productions in Mesa, Arizona, in 1995, and gave me a piece of advice that I've lived by all my career in video production, which is one fraught with a lot of people threatening to sue each other. He said, look, a cease and desist he says, in the legal world, a cease and desist is nothing. It's a warning shot to put it out there and then get to a letter of intent to sue. If you don't get a letter of intent to sue, it might as well have never happened, legally speaking. It's meant to rattle sabers. It's meant to rattle your cage. It's meant to make you feel and to make you, and it's more than anything else, it's meant to gauge whether or not you end up with an attorney replying to that person. If there's an attorney, they look up who the attorney is, and then they find out, is this an expensive attorney? If it's an expensive attorney, then they start digging into what are the financials of this person? How are they able to afford an expensive attorney? And if they, and then it says, but other than that, there's no reason for you to respond to a cease and desist letter. If they send a cease and desist letter, he said, do your best to consider whether or not you actually broke the law. Do your best to consider whether or not you are actually using it. And said, and if it goes away after the cease and desist letter, if the video goes away, there's really not much of anything they can do, especially if you have now the ability to respond and say, look, I didn't know. And so when I got a cease and desist order, I just took it down. And he said, and after that, I've never heard of somebody actually getting sued for having something posted that they apparently shouldn't have, in terms of privacy or, whatever. But generally speaking, there's this doctrine known as fair use, and fair use says if it's for social commentary. Do I have one of those, by the way? We'll keep up with this one. If it's used for social commentary, which this is, no, but I'm not accusing anybody of any crimes. I'm not saying anybody did anything evil or illegal in my eyes. I'm not an attorney. I can't say such things. All we're doing is talking about this is a thing that happened. What is the social implication of it? And as far as I am concerned, that's fair game. So anyway, Steve had been reached out. They had a moment where he, among other creators, and I'm going to show you some videos of this one here in a minute, had been threatened apparently by Midegah with lawsuits and things, and they started to get really concerned. And as that would come up, this twin sister would emerge in the story somewhere. Oh, and his sister contacted me or contacted so and so through, contacted so and so, and I heard. And these rumors would come around about his sister knows that he is accusing him of playing up their native heritage as a kind of cudgel against him, because apparently he acted violently towards her at some point. David's sister, I believe, also served in the service, and from the way that I have heard it, again, this is me hearing through other people. Apparently, she was sexually assaulted while in the service. Has a lot of emotional scarring. To say nothing of compounding the difficulty of being trans in a family where apparently at times, as you will see this accelerate, I think, in these recordings, her twin brother goes from being affirming to being transphobic as soon as he starts to feel attacked in any event. So later down the line, David Taylor, and as far as I know, this has been pulled down, hasn't been reposted anywhere. He did a live stream I watched live, and it was horrifying. It was disgusting, where he misgendered her and accused her with family members there of all kinds of moral depravity. And this is his twin. And that was all in response to apparently allegations that he was not genuine about his relationship to indigenous communities. And that's where he gets sensitive, and and all sense of dignity and love and compassion for even his own twin goes out the window, and it becomes knives out.
And I will share this. So if anyone thinks that I care about threats and accusations and allegations being brought against me, like, you know what? I had a twin who filed a restraining order who I haven't seen in 8 years and said that I broke her arm and choked her. I haven't seen her in 8 years. There's no police report. There's no medical report. It's just nonsense, because that's the world we live in, where if someone doesn't do what they want, they then go and fear you. I'm not going to be feared. I don't care. I'm not a perfect being. I'm not God. Okay? I'm not Jesus. You want a savior? There's already been one. You're the servant. You have to actively choose to willfully participate in change. If I can inspire you to do that, great, but I can't do it. I'm doing the best I can. I travel across an ocean twice a month to see suns. I'm saying this because people presented things to me that's coming through this Discord and fake profiles, Hank Holiday. And I don't care. I'm just letting you know, chasing Zion. I don't care. Do your best. It's water flowing off a duck's back. There's nothing you're going to say about me that I won't say about myself. And the allegations against me, again, that's the way of the world. Let's shame people with lies, and they'll go hide in a hole and back off from what they're doing. I am bringing the Book of Mormon into tribal communities. Deal with it. Deal with it. We have a history with Israel, and we have a firmer knowledge of what occurred, because many of you have been blinded by the European version of the Torah. Remember, God gave the Torah to Moses. It was European kings that said they knew better, and they changed it. If Lehi brought the Torah over to us, you would expect that we would have a fullness that you don't have. And we're going to be releasing a video because, yeah, many of you are paying a toll. Anything on Midegah? Why are you so angry? Because this chat is a part of the problem.
Just want to point out this. To the best of my recollection, this is only to the best of my recollection. The screen is very small here. Is I remember watching this unfold. I'm like, oh my gosh! I got into their Discord, admittedly to spy. Come to talk to people on Zion Media and relate to them in their comments. By the way, at the same time that I had gotten into Ward Radio's Discord, and as soon as somebody saw my name on there, and said, "Who is this guy?" and then saw that in my Discord profile, I'm not a gamer. I don't do Discord. I only got Discord so I could do this. And but I put on there, I'm First Herald of the Church of Korihor. And within 24 hours, a little over 24 hours of joining Ward Radio's Discord server, they kicked me out. After I saw this conversation, even replied to it, said, look, my understanding is that you guys, we talk about subjects that are important to me in my podcast, and I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm just here to participate in the conversation. And they kicked me out. Whereas Zion Media, they were very nice to me. And they're like, cool, you're welcome here. And, be nice. So I would ask again, as you'll see scrolling along the bottom of the screen, be nice to these people. If don't do what I did. Admittedly, I did this to see what Midegah was posting behind closed doors. And I'm going to show you here in a minute. You'll see some of the things he was posting publicly, which are pretty damning of themselves. But this is all within a matter of a few hours and days. This was, I think, all in all, these posts were less than a week before he was out of the server again. And this was after he was trying to revitalize his image inside this community of people who, frankly, they were very respectful towards him and treat him like he's another Joseph Smith, in my opinion. So that's how
we had a plot that was being provided to us in Nauvoo, a city that is completely owned by the LDS Church, and the family that owned it was going to give it to us for a cultural center of the Americas. We had a member of the Quorum of the 70 who was also, his family was going to personally pay for the millions of dollars to build this cultural center, and they even had the design. It made it all the way to Daniel de Alameda, the guy who manages these things for the church and the area authority over the church in this region and over the continent. And they rejected it, even though it was all going to be paid for, because we had to get their approval to put it in Nauvoo. And why did they reject it? They rejected it because we're working with other groups, and yet they claim to be interfaith, and they claim to value other peoples. No, they don't. I'm sorry, but they don't.
So this is where I think things really start to come apart for David Taylor. And Harry, thank you for making that comment. I'd love to see any comments from anybody else. I realize this is a lot, and it's pretty negative, and we want to get to some better stuff here. And maybe something that's not quite so dark in tone. If anybody thinks that, this is about enough of these recordings, that's cool. Just throw it in the chat. We'll finish it up. There's less than 5 minutes left of it. I think, like less than 5 minutes. But I'll just accelerate it here, otherwise, and just kind of just say there's more of that. Okay.
Done is nonsense to try to stop what's occurring. Your name is Hank Holiday, and your name is.
He posts two of this is where things have really gone off the rails. It really started to get personal, bitter, and angry is when he starts calling out two members on the server who are apparently either one person. He accuses them being, I don't know any of the backdoor politics of what goes on in Zion Media. Maybe these are one person with two accounts. I don't even really care. But I mean, he gets very sensitive about people talking about it behind his back, which, anybody would, but the tone becomes, well, here, we'll wrap it up. This will be the last of the recordings, the secret recordings. And I did record these without asking Zion Media if I could. If it comes over my computer, I feel I have a right to record it if it's a thing that is relevant to the social commentary of the thing.
There was something revealed to me when you see the reflection of darkness, you move away from it. I've seen that. I don't want anything to do with anybody who calls themselves Latter-day Saints. I'm looking for Jesus Christ, period. And I'm looking to him, period. And I would say anybody who's looking to a man instead of looking to Jesus, you might want to redirect your eyesight, because a prophet's supposed to say to wicked people, look to Jesus, not look to me.
And yet that's what he keeps doing. In my opinion, David Taylor, when you see this, I'm sure you will. We've had conversations, David Taylor, through the chat of some videos. At least I've had conversations with somebody who claims to be you. You're welcome to talk to me. The conversations we have, by the way, I just want to mention this, and it's on record now. My conversations I've had with David Taylor through the chat feature on YouTube, very cordial, very respectful. He gave me feedback. I gave him feedback. That's cool. Yeah, that's an interesting question there, Harry. I don't really get deep into this. There is apparently a Facebook group where people are talking about satanic ritual abuse and as related to Zion Media. I've never heard that. That doesn't mean it's not there or that doesn't happen. But I haven't heard anything specifically about that. And but then I really only follow them when they go after all these other charlatans. I've been following their content they've been making with Rob Warcup, basically, as far as I'm concerned. Now, this one I will throw out there and just put it out there. This Rob Warcup, I get why they're excited about him. Another Mormon charlatan. As far as I'm concerned, he's as bad. And this is as dangerous. His stuff is quite frankly just as dangerous. I don't care for it. But and then they've also had David Midegah's or David Taylor's partner in the release of these lost records on their show, Brian Nettles, who apparently is the guy who made the app. He runs a company that makes apps. I will say that app, the Lost Records or Ancient Records app, it sucks. I was on it, paid $10 a month, I think, for like 4 months before I canceled it. And I finally got my hands on these records, and frankly, they are a snooze cruise. They're not interesting. Nothing about them appears to be authentic. He led people along, led them along. I didn't post here any of the posts. I didn't include here any posts where he was asking people for money, but he had. There were moments where he posted and said, "Look, we're trying to raise a certain amount of money for me to go to attend this conference or what have you." And then he was always inviting people and like calling them out publicly, saying, "I want to invite so and so to come out to this event I'm having with my partners through this group or that group or this group or that group," and promising and then over promising and under delivering. It was frustrating for a lot of people. I'm going to show a couple of things here just really quickly to kind of give you a little bit more of this story before we talk about how I feel like I exposed why, Midegah needed to not be platformed so broadly inside this space. With my interview with Dr. Troyer, I've gotten a lot of compliments from a lot of people, including Mormon, at least two, I can say, Mormon historians who told me they were very like Mormon historians, like people who this is something they do, this is their field, who said that conversation with Anton Troyer was really good. And I'm grateful for that. I thought it was really good too. I want to cut now to a recent Christopher Blythe. I don't know if you know this name. Christopher Blythe is a Mormon historian who teaches, as I recall, at BYU. I have only slightly started to follow him since I saw him on Ward Radio a few weeks ago. I only watch, as you guys know, I only watch this Mormon show, Ward Radio, on YouTube to hate watch it and make snarky comments and things. But as I was listening to him, I was pretty impressed. This is a man, as I understand it, from his story, he's a convert to the church. He appears to be an actually good historian for the most part. And okay, Tim has his feelings, so that's okay. We all have feelings. And he's been nothing but polite to me. I'll say that much. I don't want to reveal too much, but he's been very polite to me and respectful. And we have this open dialogue. And I happen to ask him about, are you planning to come out with any Midegah content, related content? Because and then I happen to slip to him that I have a video with, recordings I made of David Taylor losing it on people at Zion Media. And he didn't really seem interested in that. I'm like, okay, whatever. And and he said, "Did you see the couple episodes I've already released?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Really?" He's like, "I thought you were." Anyways, he's like, "Yeah, I interviewed Rod Meldrum." Okay, so you're going to hear a little bit from Rod Meldrum. I apologize for that ahead of time, especially if Cara Burrell is out there. If you don't know, that's a little inside humor among ex-Mormons. Anyway, Rod Meldrum is a wild card in Mormonism. Yeah, sorry, Tim. I'll make it quick. Rod Meldrum is like one of these young earth creationist Mormons who believes the earth is less than 6,000 years old, that there are good reasons for the priesthood ban on black men holding the priesthood, that, evolutionary science is wrong. Dinosaurs don't know, the Big Bang, no, all of these things. He has this whole, he runs this organization called Firm Foundation. Yeah. Basically, I'm going to just really quickly go through this. A few clips from this episode that he did. This interview with Rod Meldrum. Rod Meldrum, people in the ex-Mormon space and the Mormon space largely think of him as intolerable and insufferable, because he just makes claims like nothing. So it was wild to me to hear the story. I'm like, looking at this, and I'm like, I put off watching this for that reason. So again, I'm going to make it very quick. How a man who many Mormons and ex-Mormons find completely insufferable to listen to says that he got alarm bells about Midegah's claims. But we're going to start with a quick recording I did from this episode of a couple of clips on why he was initially attracted to Midegah, who wanted to be platformed on his programming. So, real quick video.
There's cultural things, but there's so many. I could tell you, a dozen other things that from Native American, cultural, mythology, if you want, you call it that, that match up with the Book of Mormon just amazingly well. Yeah.
Which means when a Ojibwe Latter-day Saint showed up on the scenes, lots of us were really excited about this.
Yeah, and especially, well, so there's a lot of cultural things within the church, basically, that talk about how, we have the gold plates, but 2/3 of them are sealed. And eventually the prophecies are that there's going to be, these records are going to come forth. And also,
okay, so I'm just going to mention this, and then so I'm going to pull this down, this clip, and I'm going to show you a different one here. So you get the kind of gist of it. If you don't know, catch up a little bit. In Mormonism, that book of gold plates that supposedly Joseph Smith translated into the Book of Mormon, his claim was that whole book of plates, about 2/3 of them had a band of metal around them that had been sealed, and that he wasn't allowed to read from that sealed portion. It's called the sealed portion. In fact, another Mormon charlatan, forgive me, I'm just going to say it that way, named Christopher Nemelka, claimed to have translated said sealed portion into a book you can just look up and find called the Sealed Portion. And there are some fringe Mormons, including, I will say, in Zion Media were nice people. Again, I can't stress this enough. They're nice people. I respect that they're trying to find spiritual meaning in a world that doesn't have any from God's, but they're looking for a word of God. The Book of Mormon's not enough for these people. I've been saying this for a while. The church has been trying to sell them that the Book of Mormon has everything you need. Even the Bible doesn't have enough. Now they seem to be shifting their perspective on that. Let me skip ahead though to Rod Meldrum talking about how he eventually comes to decide that he is not going to have anything to do with Midegah and why that accelerated into what I think is the crash out that kind of ended Midegah's relevance inside the fringe Mormon space.
They wanted to get more people there, and so they invited me to come and speak at the 50,000 people on an email list or something like that.
The people, he says they here are a couple by the name of James. Their last name is James. I think he makes mention of their name here in a moment. I think. Well, here, let me just see if I can catch it again. Their last name is James, but they are they had this conference called Prepare a People, and they were basically platforming for a while some of these fringe speakers inside the Mormon movement, and Midegah was allegedly, apparently supposed to be one of them. And this is how this comes. The stories, we're getting a peek at the inside baseball on how it is that David Taylor apparently started to lose his shit on Rod Meldrum, particularly the guy you're looking at here.
Which was going to be up in Rexburg, Idaho. And I said I would come in and come and do that, and we would send it out to. We had, I think, 50,000 people on an email list or something like that. So we, so I said, okay, we'll help you, promote it and so forth. They'll come up and speak. And there was a guy that was speaking there that I didn't get to hear because I was out talking to other people and so forth. But his name was Chad Daybell, and Ryan was in the audience there, and he listened to Chad Daybell. He came out afterwards. He says, "Rod," he says, "if that guy's going to speak again," he says, "then I'm not coming to these conferences." He says, "and I'd highly advise that you not speak at them either." I said, "Really? It was that bad?" I said, "Yeah, it was that bad."
Now again, they're not talking about Midegah here. Just in case you didn't catch it, they're talking about Chad Daybell. And I have to say, as much as I don't care for Rod Meldrum or his pseudoscientific perspective of the world, by the way, I want to get to a Ross. I want to get to your comment here in a moment because I like this. I don't know who you are. I don't know if we've talked yet. Anyways, I gotta give props to Rod Meldrum here to have the clairvoyance to be able to say this Chad Daybell guy, he's a loony and he's going to eventually children. So I'm not saying that he had that clairvoyance and he's speaking to this now in the distant future from when Chad Daybell has been found guilty of horrendous crimes. It's easy now to say that I always knew, I always had a bad feeling about it. But apparently they didn't go to this conference because it was platforming Chad Daybell, who all that Chad Daybell did at this point that he points out, I'm going to skip ahead here a little bit. The reason why that he says they ended up not attending this conference and not speaking at this conference was because Chad Daybell was talking about the end of the world, just like Tom Harrison does in Visions of Glory. I'm not going to get into that. Based upon some dreams that he has had. Dreams are very, very important inside Mormon culture, but particularly inside this prepper cult, the Mormon prepper cult, if you've heard about it, the Chad Daybell, Lori Daybell group, the Tim Ballards. You see how this all comes. It all comes back to Tim Ballard some way. Even if it's just circumstantial. By the way, interesting developments on the Tim Ballard story. I'm going to save that for Friday, but I think I have found some interesting links between Tim Ballard and Jeffrey Epstein after all. More interesting than ever before. And I don't want to preface it until I've done a little more digging. But I will say this, at least they were concerned enough about the spiritual welfare and spiritual well-being of people to say this Chad Daybell of LDS people and people in their community say, we'll entertain some pretty wild things. This is me putting words in their mouth. We'll entertain some pretty wild and unorthodox things, or return to some things that are orthodox, but the Mormon Church is trying to move beyond. And um, but this is too far, and anybody who would be saying some of these things probably is not somebody we should be platforming. And the thing that comes up both with Chad Daybell and with Midegah, and the only reason why it appears that these people are starting to get connected inside Rod Meldrum's brain, is that he starts to talk about this, basically the Samuel the Lamanite narrative type of thing, which is that he is a prophet, the individual is a prophet outside of the church's ordination, sent by God to rein in the church's leadership and correct the Big 15, correct the First Presidency and the Quorum of the 12. And for all of their wild interpretations of things, at least these Mormons apparently want to honor the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and its traditions enough to say, if you speak ill of the brethren, of the prophet and the prophet, seers, and revelators, that's a red flag to us that you're of the wrong spirit, that you are well, I'm sure they believe that he is of the devil. And so he at this point he's only talking about Chad Daybell, but this whole interview with Christopher Blythe, again, very nice to me, been very courteous and cordial with me. And even we had a conversation recently where he said, Joe, I'm just going to be upfront with you in case you don't know who I am. I am very religious and I am very Mormon, and I do believe the church is true. And I said to him, I understand that. I always knew that. I said, and yet you're being cordial and respectful towards me now. I respect that. And Christopher, if you're out there now, I repeat that. And now I've said it to my audience. So, but then he is giving this interview to talk about ultimately how things end up blowing up between him and David Taylor in a way that I think really did start to undo David Taylor's influence inside the fringe Mormon community. And let's see if we can get to that point.
That's you guys, and you put it back up. Take it back down. I don't want it up there.
Oh, I'm sorry. I said I would address this. Hey, Ross, I don't know who you are. If you are someone known to me, I hope you will reach out to me separately, because I think this is actually pretty good. Krista Melka, I mentioned a moment ago, has this book called The Sealed Portion, where he basically, I say he took, I think that there's a video recording, I'm convinced, of him admitting that he basically forged it. From what I understand, he has walked back that claim, that statement, and he is claiming again that the sealed portion did come from God. If you look at, one of the interesting things is that a lot of Orthodox Mormons today will say, if you don't have gold plates, and even Rod Meldrum will say here, if you don't have gold plates, you got to have another physical record, or you have to have a story about where it went, because that's as good as the one that Joseph Smith gave, which is that the angel Moroni, or the heavenly messenger, whoever that is, came back and got the plates, and woo, they are with the Colobians now. They are on Kolob. They're not in this place, in this world anymore. And apparently that's a convincing story. All right. Well, I believed it once. I mean, okay. But if you think of Joseph Smith, the whole story about Krista Melka or anybody else, and they're going to mention here another one, a man named Cloud Pilar, who claimed to use a crystal skull apparently to remote view, that is to say, view from where you are somewhere else and view a record through a magic seer stone, and see a record that's out there someplace else, and that's obviously fake. That's definitely people who are operating from a narrative that is separate from the truth about Joseph Smith's claims, because Joseph Smith was famous for remote viewing. There's a whole court case in which the evidence was presented that he used seer stones, including a translucent white stone, probably, I don't know how similar to Cloud Pilar's crystal skull. By the way, did you guys like the opening song and the whole ExmoJoe and the Moronic rescue? Did everybody catch the whole Moroni thing? Moronic rescue, anyways. That he was able to reveal additional records from the Book of Mormon. Same trick, basically. Look into the stone. This Cloud Pilar apparently could look into a stone and fill in the gaps in the Book of Mormon. And the Mormons, the fringe Mormons who listen to that and say, well, that's obviously fake, he's obviously making it up, are applying some solid critical thinking there. Congrats to you, saints. You're welcome. But the fact that that doesn't get applied to Joseph Smith, I would put to you as mainly that a question of the control of the information within the church. That being said, there are some Mormon historians, always have been some Mormon historians, publishing in dialogue or in these church publications, Sunstone and so forth, publishing papers in which they have always, to some measure, admitted, yeah, well, there's church history as the church tells it, and then there's real church history, and nary the twain shall meet. So, but Rod Meldrum and some of the more mainstream saints, I wouldn't call him mainstream, but he's closer than Midegah. They do tend to believe this, that Joseph Smith probably never used remote viewing, that if he used a seer stone, it wasn't this chocolate colored stone or that white stone. He's going to make, he might make mention here of Hannah Stoddard from the Joseph Smith Foundation, who has plainly stated, this is where things get a little shaky inside this fringe Mormon group. She's pretty well stated. I would say the Stoddard family, someone call me out. Hannah, you and your family, you're welcome to come on the show and interview with me. They've pretty well called out the Mormon church's leadership and saying, we don't know how they got deceived, but the church is obviously deceived into believing that this chocolate colored stone that they say Joseph Smith used by placing it into a hat to remote view the scriptures, the gold plates, where they were separately located, like out under the outhouse or under the shed or out in the log, out in the woods, and that he would look into his hat and remote view. It doesn't make sense. And it's not the story that he told, by his own mouth and or pen. And they're half right. He did tell conflicting versions of that story, as best I can tell. But one of them, the original one, does appear to be this remote viewing story. And to say that Chris Nemelka's sealed portion or the Nemenhah records by Cloud Pilar are less authentic than the Book of Mormon because they were acquired by means of a seer stone or a set of seer stones and using remote viewing, and then not discrediting Joseph Smith at the same time, I think is not. I think it's being selective with your critical thinking. So apply broader critical thinking. But there are Mormons in this in this Orthodox Mormonism, but not necessarily mainstream Mormonism Venn diagram, who believe that the Mormon Church's leadership actually has been deceived into becoming honest and trying to get honest about Joseph Smith's means for creating the Book of Mormon.
And they said, it wasn't us. We didn't do it. We can't take it down. We don't know who did it. And so even to this day, it's still there. And it has like 10 or 15,000 views or something. I'm not sure what it is. But
okay, here he's talking about the video where Midegah went off on a rant about him. And Midegah posted this, David Taylor posted this video, took it down, and then apparently got reposted. And according to Rod Meldrum, he went through the number of people who had in some way gotten a hold of this YouTube video or whatever it was and downloaded it so that they would have it, because this is a thing that David Taylor does. And I do think that this probably has to do with mental illness. And so I do want to be careful about it, because I respect that mental illness can happen to anyone, okay? And it's more common people think, and it's not a moral failure to have mental illness. But David Taylor will post a rant that seems borderline threatening and then take it down. He does it. I've seen him do it with his sister. I've seen him do it with Rod Meldrum. I've seen him do it with these people on Zion Media. In fact, I just showed you how he did this with some people in Zion Media. He'll post it, he'll bring it back down. And there have been moments where I've seen Shane Baldwin, again, not a guy I think is a representative of God, obviously, because I am an atheist. But I think he is honest in his pursuit of the truth. And at least he's honest enough to say he doesn't think that the Book of Mormon, or he doesn't say it this way. Let me not put words in his mouth. He's honest about the fact that he wants there to be more records about the Book of Mormon. And there apparently is a prophecy by Joseph Smith, not necessarily celebrated in the mainstream, that in the last days, the sealed portion of the Book of Mormon would be revealed. The claim, according to Chris Nemelka, was that Joseph had promised his brother Hiram that he would be the one to reveal the sealed portion of the plates, but that his brother Hiram and he, as every Mormon knows, passed away. They were murdered in Carthage jail in Carthage, Illinois in 1844. And so they didn't get the chance. And so his brother Hiram would never get the chance. And according to Chris Nemelka, he had this transformational experience inside the Salt Lake City Temple where he became Joseph Smith's dead brother Hiram. And that then at least the interview that I saw, the video that I have seen of this, I've heard alternating versions of Chris Nemelka's story. In the one that I saw, he took 2 flat stones that he had in like a deer hide. I think it was like in a deer hide leather pouch or something, or wrap, and that he could take them and he could use them to remote view the sealed portion of the gold plates. And as we got from A. Ross here. Yeah. No, yeah, absolutely. I understand that. I'm sorry about your headache. I'll try to talk more softly. No, I won't. I'm kidding. To say that Chris Nemelka is not, honest because he claims to have used remote viewing to translate the Book of Mormon is perhaps unwittingly on some people, in some members of the church, some faithful Orthodox Mormons' view, actually discrediting the translation of the Book of Mormon according to Joseph Smith. Anyway, apparently David Taylor told, well, no, I know for a fact they did because I've seen the recording of this, posted this video that seemed very alarmingly threatening towards. It gave me a feeling of that this is aggressive. Like I see how somebody would look at this and say, is he going to hurt me? Is he going to try and send somebody to hurt me? Is he going to try and sue me? Is he going to whatever? And Rod Meldrum has a foundation that, as far as I know, has some money, firm foundation. I would be much more concerned if I were Rod Meldrum, thank goodness I'm not, no offense, than Steve Pinecker, whom he also threatened.
Wait, but it's still there.
You were actually just delaying your reading.
That's Christopher right there, Christopher Blythe.
Yeah, I wasn't canceling the meeting, and I definitely, was not doing any kind of a hit things. I wanted to find out more about who this guy is. Does he really have records? What's the real deal?
Okay, so I think that's about enough of Rod Meldrum. We probably passed that a while ago, actually. But suffice it to say, as you just heard, the story that he tells to Christopher Blythe in this episode is that he was trying for a long time, as weeks or months, to get a face-to-face interview or at least a phone call with David Taylor so that he could basically grill him and qualify that he is who he claims to be. And yeah, Tim, you're welcome, Tim. That he claims that he is who he claims to be before getting in bed with him. And that makes total sense to me. Rod Meldrum making sense. Somebody pull me out of this timeline.
I could not find anyone who knew the origin of this Nemenhah record.
Okay, I won't even bring this one up. I'll just go ahead and take this out. Basically, I already went over this. The Nemenhah record, I will say this, he's right, in my opinion. The Nemenha record is not legitimate, and apparently Midegah did have something to do with this gentleman, Cloud Piler, who, as I understand it, is actually Native American and claims that he has this spiritual calling, very similar to Midegah's claims. Midegah at various times has claimed that he was called by that he was ordained by one of the three Nephites. Apparently, I still haven't seen that claim, or if I have, I forgot. Anyway, I want to show you another couple of things. We're getting off of the Rod Meldrum thing. You can all breathe a sigh of relief. I want to show you just another couple of clips before we get on to my interview with Dr. Troyer, which I think will be a great way to wrap up this conversation and move on to some church business, Church of Korihor business. If you don't know, we're the Church of Korihor spiritual community for godless people. Very much appreciate your likes to this video. Subscribe to the channel. I will try to continue to post on YouTube as long as I can, though we are building our own social media app. It's called the Korihor app. You do not have to be an atheist to join. You do not have to be a Korihor to join, but you can't just automatically join. You have to request to join. You can do that at korihor.app. Basically, it is a social media platform where there are no bots, no billionaires, and no bullshit. And all of our work there is going to be, as we release it, to help people to grow and develop spiritually and individually in a godless way, and also to have opportunities to help people in need. Okay, so here we go. Midegah. Yeah, Midegah recordings. That's the one. That's the one. That's the one. Okay.
Kind to Midegah. While I don't agree with his methods, his approach, or the doctrine that he teaches, this is Seth from Rise Zion. Just making this from Rise Zion. Just making this. Hi everyone, this is Seth from Rise Zion.
Sorry, this is a little bit raw. These quick snaps from these channels. Okay, so I wanted to mention this. Let me just throw this in here. Thank you very much, Christopher Blythe, for being kind enough to let us use your footage here. This is Rise Zion. Put that in there, so we are, we have attributed him, not because it's, legally binding, but because it's polite. I have had a conversation, not a conversation. I have had a call out from this gentleman, Seth here, and I have called him out on Hellfire Agency. I don't agree with his perspectives on things. He is a Mormon YouTube creator, but I will say he's a respectful person. And when I had mentioned in his comments one day, just throwing out in the comments, I'm like, I don't know, like you and I disagree on pretty much everything. And I don't care for a lot of your perspective on things, on certain things, but you're calling out Midegah, I had said in his comments. And for that, you have my respect. And he happened to see it and say, Hellfire Agency. Okay. And he said, you're the Korihor guy. And he said, I've seen your show and I liked it. And but he said something like that. He's like, I liked it. We should talk. And I went, yes, we should talk. So that conversation hasn't happened. He's busy. I'm busy. But this young man, I mean, I assume he's young. He's younger than me anyways. I don't agree with him. Again, I don't agree with him on just about anything at Rise Zion. And I think a lot of his stuff is alarmist. He's one of these, end of the world guys, one of these Mormons who's been out there making content about you need to prepare for the end times, Jesus is coming back, Armageddon, and so forth. And I think it's dangerous. I don't care for it. And yeah. And so anyways, so I started watching his content, his show, to get more information about Midegah. Ended up covering a little bit about his content. And then I was surprised to find that he got thrown further into the Midegah story when apparently David Taylor threatened to sue him.
Just making this short to let you all know that I just posted a new video discussing the legal threats made against me by Chief Midegah and also against the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The video is scheduled to air at 4:45 p.m. Mountain Standard Time.
So just again, wanted to go over this. Where Mormon creators start to turn against David Taylor. As any person, frankly, I'm surprised that David Taylor um, wouldn't know this, having come from a Mormon family, having had Mormon experiences. I understand that he's not what you would consider, a conventional Mormon in most senses. In any sense, sure, I can respect that. Um, but he should have expected this, frankly, having come from the Mormon community. If you attack the brethren, they'll turn on you. I I mean, how big was the Denver Snuffer movement? Is the Denver Snuffer movement? And yet, when Denver Snuffer, in my perspective, once he basically was able to come forth to say what a lot of ex-Mormons have said, is that the Mormon Church's priesthood leadership has been corrupted, and the current prophet, while called to his calling as the prophet, he has effectively gone astray, and that is what David Taylor, pretty early on in the process of his rise to fame inside this circle, started to say that he was Samuel the Lamanite. I'm going to say that Samuel the Lamanite stuff here for a minute, so we're going to do a quick review. I'm just going to skip through. These are some videos from Zion Media's YouTube channel, which are still up. These videos on their channel about when they were platforming David Taylor.
Hi, everyone. This is.
And then I went through the temple. And then I realized these are the same.
This is his claim that he has made several times, that the lodge ceremonies of indigenous peoples and the temple ceremonies that Mormons do in the temple, which are largely adaptations of Masonic rituals. They are. I'm sorry, but they are. I'm not sorry. They are. And that they are the same, which is, frankly, to the best of my knowledge, total hogwash.
Wow.
And on the day I graduated, I was picked up by President.
The guy you're seeing there is Shane Baldwin. I don't want any negative comments about him if we can avoid it. Look, this guy, Shane Baldwin, I went in prepared to be very angry at him, prepared to be very nasty about him, because the last I had seen of him was when he appeared on an episode of Ward Radio, before I started getting into this whole Midegah thing, talking about Tim Ballard, and lobbing praise onto Tim Ballard back when there were just a handful of us out there making content about the Tim Ballard secret whiteboard meeting, and and the connections into Mormonism and some of the more extreme Orthodox Mormon groups. He bills himself as the Mormon Wolf of Wall Street, since he bills himself that way. Sells a book apparently he wrote on the subject. I don't feel it's an attack on him to use his own branding here. But basically, this man, as I understand it, was found guilty of a form of real estate fraud in Salt Lake City. He went to prison, did I think a 5-year stint in prison, during which time he gave his life to Christ, and took up the pursuit of salvation. And frankly, and a lot of Mormons, read his book and were very moved and inspired by it. And I can see why. It makes sense that people would find his story very moving and inspiring. That being said, I've done coverage about how he did this video where he went down here to Colorado City, where the Mormon fundamentalists, the Mormon polygamists are from, and went through the Keep Sweet, Pray and Obey building that I also went down just a few weeks ago in response to this. He went down there with Nick Shirley. This is the guy who supposedly is revealing all this fraud that's happening all over America. And none of it is Republican fraud. All of it is Democratic fraud, of course. And I exposed how they went through this building, apparently, allegedly. I pretty well proved that they didn't have permission to do that, and or they didn't have, and they will get you for stuff like that. But I don't know. I don't know if there's anybody really in a position to do anything about it or who even cares. And they misrepresented not just what's going on in the FLDS community, in my opinion, in a way I don't like. And Shane, I'm just telling you, I'm just putting it on record here. I didn't like it, and I thought that was extremely dishonest that you guys would present it that way, just for clicks, just for views, and just because Nick Shirley, frankly, is a fraud. Nick Shirley is an absolute fraud. Nick Shirley is a petulant child with no with no spine to stand up for any actual truth, in my opinion. That's the point where I will turn dark and nasty here. I think that Nick Shirley is a complete and total charlatan and a fraud. And the sooner that this kid and his family of fraudsters get their comeuppance, I don't mean any violence, I want to say it expressly, but as soon as they get exposed for the fact that they are lying all the time and just using other people's pain and suffering, especially the pain and suffering of immigrants, to capitalize and make money, the better. But in any event, Shane came down here and they did this whole episode at Colorado City, in which they said, I can't believe that this man, and then describing Warren Jeffs and his relationships to teenage girls, did this, and this, and then laid out a rap sheet of Joseph Smith and Brigham Young and all of the Mormon prophets from the polygamist era of Mormonism. I mean, they're like, and can you imagine if the mainstream church, if the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints had a history like that? And for two men who grew up in the church, as far as I know, anyways, or had a long exposure to the church, to present Warren Jeffs and his behavior as if it was some kind of phenomenon or mystery inside the FLDS, inside the LDS world, and that's not certainly anything like the church and the religion and the traditions created by Joseph Smith. It was disingenuous and wrong, and it was shaming other people for something they do.
Amen.
Listen, let's talk about Joseph Smith first, and I can talk about him. Listen, there are things that people say.
I didn't finish that thought. Nonetheless, all in all, I think what Shane Baldwin is doing is getting a lot of heat that it doesn't deserve. He is basically, his community, from what I can tell, is basically using artificial intelligence to create spiritual tools for Mormons in their community to reconnect through some of these fringe ideas of Midegahs, but also others. I got into, they had a Google server, document server at one point called Kimora. And I got in there and I downloaded as much as I could out of this, where they talked about, these are the other teachings, these are the other scriptures. And I saw the lost, I saw the sealed portion by Krista Melka. It was in there. All these different fringe break off Mormon scriptures over the years, they're all in there. And look, I'm not trying to shame them. I'm saying, once again, as I have said before and continue to say, these Mormons want more. They don't feel like they have enough scripture. And I don't blame them, considering that the Book of Mormon's too old to relate to the modern trials of people in this day. And it makes sense to me they're looking for more. So here he is talking to David Taylor.
And things that really happened. Martha Smith is my grandmother. Now, we don't look at our ancestors and say first, second, third, fourth, fifth. Stop it, because if they were living, they'd say, you're my grandson. Okay? And she married an Indian. She married a descendant of Pocahontas. That's another line I have. And that was pretty controversial at the time when she married Hiram Bell Bennett. He was an Indian. So it must have been the exact same time as your aunt.
I'm gonna skip ahead here because this gets obnoxious, but you're getting a flavor of it. Okay, let's watch a little bit of this clip from a friend of the program, Stephen Pinecker, from Mormon Book Reviews on the same subject. Here, let me go ahead and change our banner while we do that.
News. As you know, I have a very close relationship with the Church of Jesus Christ. I also interviewed.
I should mention this before it gets much further in here. This is Mormon Book Reviews. Steve is not Mormon. Steve is he has a show called Mormon Book Reviews, in which he talks about his story as an evangelical Christian who used to be atheist and had as a teenager fallen in love with Arnold Freeberg paintings inside a copy of the Book of Mormon that he found, which I could relate to because I was a sucker for an Arnold Freeberg paintings depicting the stories of the Book of Mormon. And from there, he started to read the Book of Mormon. And even though he believes he is a practicing Christian, born again, and evangelical Christian, and proud of his Christian origins, he represents a group of evangelical Christians, not formally, but he speaks up for a group of evangelical Christians who come from Mormon adjacent community, who happen to be very well connected and to be very favorable to some of the ideas taught in the Book of Mormon and or the traditions that come out of Joseph Smith and the challenges that Joseph Smith made into Christianity. And so and are respectful of that. And he's one of these people who has a deep and I think sincere interest in Mormon history and how Mormon texts develop. As Steve and I have had conversations, as I mentioned before, by phone and formally, publicly here on our on my channel and on his. I've been fortunate enough to have been on Mormon Book Reviews more than once. We have talked for a while about our concern for the Mormon community and how David Taylor or Midegah has been leading people down a path that to us seems pretty dangerous. And I'll reveal that much. I haven't had a conversation with Steve about how much of these private conversations I'm going to reveal. So I don't want to talk too much about that. But suffice it to say, when Steve told me that he was going to publish this video, I got very concerned. And you're going to see why.
Chief Midegah, when he first got baptized into that church. And that was the first conversation I ever had with him. And the last conversation I had with him was attending at the general conference, the baptism of 12 new members into the Church of Jesus Christ.
The group he's talking about is the Church of Jesus Christ. They are considered by the Mormons that you think of when you think about Mormons to be an offshoot group of Mormonism. They're often referred to as Bickertonites, the Mormons that you think of when you think of Mormons, the Six Spired building in Salt Lake City and the missionaries with the black name tags, the community I came from. Those are often referred to as the Brighamites, the followers of Brigham. So he's talking about how David Taylor, when he realized apparently that he was on the outs with the Brighamites, without formally resigning, though he did say, I skipped over it, he did say in those recordings that he was planning in the next 2 weeks at that time to resign from the church. My understanding was that he did a lot of threatening that he was going to resign from the mainstream LDS church because they are not interfaith, because they do not build community with other churches which there's some truth to that, I think. But anyways, he joined the Bickertonite church and started to build a movement over in the Bickertonite church. And that was very short-lived. From what I could tell, within a matter of days, like less than a week, there was already rumors that he either had been kicked out of the Bickertonite church after having joined them, or that there was talk about him doing that.
My interactions with David, Chief Midegah, were very positive and very civil. So personally, I like him very much. It's come to my attention that the Church of Jesus Christ has suspended Chief Midegah. Why? Well, he made some comments last week on some of his live streams that were critical of the church and its leadership. And the church felt that it needed to do what I call a pastoral correction in this matter. Now, this is a very difficult thing that I'm taping today because it's sad that this has happened. Chief Midegah is a person that about a year ago really made some inroads and caused a lot of people to be very interested in what he was bringing to the table. Unfortunately, he was saying things that weren't very nice about the church he just joined. And as a result, the church had to take this action, and they didn't do it lightly. And a lot of thought and prayer went into this. So when it was brought to my attention that this had happened, I actually contacted the leadership of the church and told them, okay, I've been made aware of this. They did not know that I knew until I told them. And I said, I have a journalistic obligation to report this story. And so I just want to announce that this has happened. Now, this does not mean he was excommunicated or disfellowshipped. I'm not speaking for the church here, but I've been told that the door is open to David Taylor, Chief Midegah, for any time.
So I mentioned that Steve got very interested in Mormonism through a Book of Mormon, and that he picked up and took an interest in the Book of Mormon, read the Book of Mormon, liked it, even though he did not ever, to my knowledge, has never joined any Mormon church. The community, he does tell a story on his show. Again, Mormon Book Reviews is the show you want to look up. He does mention he talks about on the show that when he finally went to a Mormon church to attend church and build community there, it wasn't to an LDS or L-DS church or Brighamites. He went to the Bickertonite church, and there he made a lot of friends. And I have seen him do interviews with members of their priesthood leadership there. He plays very nicely with the LDS church. It's by the fact that, if you don't know, Steve, one of the things that made his channel really take off was that he was one of the people interviewed by John Dehlin on Mormon Stories, who came forward to say, I'm an evangelical Christian. I don't consider myself Mormon in any way, but I like the Book of Mormon. And John had a great episode, a couple episodes with him. Took a lot of, I feel like John took too much flack for the fact that he was willing to platform and talk to Steve. But considering how many members and even priesthood leadership inside the mainstream Brighamite church Steve has found there, and he really has become kind of this peacemaker middle ground between Mormon sects. I give Steve all the credit for that. That is a very difficult thing to manage, all of those different perspectives. And I would imagine it's something that's I don't think he ever describes it this way. This is my description of it. It's a thing that's particularly bold for a gay man to do in this community, where some Mormon churches are more, particularly the Community of Christ Church, what used to be known as the RLDS, are more queer and or gay affirming than the mainstream LDS church, which I think is still quite homophobic. And so to build inroads in all these communities at the same time, it's very difficult work. And I have watched as Steve has had to navigate that. And when Midegah apparently threatened him with lawsuits and so forth, I thought number one, strategically, it was stupid, because but more than that, it was it was the silliest misplacement of hatred for a person. And it's like, it's all Steve did was to report on this. My understanding is that apparently, I believe the understanding, as it has been reported to me by other persons, not just Steve, is that David Taylor apparently blames his being ultimately, I don't think they call it excommunicated, but distanced or disfellowshipped from the Bickertonite church, was that he believes that Steve got in the middle of it and reported on him, tattled on him to get him kicked out. I have no reason to believe that's true.
Hopefully for restoration and a time of healing. So I'm hopeful that will be the case. I just want to tell everybody, just keep the Church of Jesus Christ in your prayers, and the people of the church, and Chief Midegah, who is an image bearer.
Anyway, we all make mistakes, and this is an interesting time. But there you go. So you get so there's a flavor of the conflict surrounding Midegah that you just witnessed at the start of this episode, how that became heated as Midegah crashed out in one of his rants. As far as I know to this day, no lawsuits have actually gone to trial or gone to court. I don't know that Midegah has attorneys to do such a thing. I'm not really sure and the more I try to figure out what his game is with any of this, is the more it just seems to me like he gets temperamental and he gets angry, and rather than threatening to hurt people, he threatens to sue them. And but the language comes across to me, and this is my personal opinion, comes off feeling very violent. Whether or not he threatens physical violence to this day, I don't know. Well, I don't know of any instances that I can recall off the top of my head, anyways, where he actually threatened to hurt somebody physically. But the language and the tone is very aggressive, and I've known more than one person who felt intimidated because of what this guy's been saying, just in response to the fact that he you know he can't take criticism of his claims. And if you're going to take a position like this Samuel the Lamanite type position, you're going to have to be willing to take a little heat. My next clip, I'm going to show you a few clips here. You may recognize at least one of the people in this clip.
Listening to the audiobook version. By the way, those at home who haven't read Dr. Troyer's books, I gotta recommend the audiobook version of that I listened to. I mean,
I already talked about this. And hey, don't check your mirrors. You're not seeing double. This is ExmoJoe covering ExmoJoe, but more particularly, and skip ahead here, covering this man. It's not the best image of him, although it's hard to find a terribly unflattering image of Dr. Troyer. This man that you're looking at here has a great channel where he talks about on YouTube, where he talks about his work with restoring and maintaining the language of the Ojibwe, the community that David Taylor comes from, the indigenous community that David Taylor claims to come from. Has, in my opinion, a better voice in this man, Anton Troyer. I just give you a quick rundown on who this person is. I took advantage of an opportunity to have a conversation, that you're going to see some clips of here, with this man, Dr. Troyer, doing some investigating into the claims of Midegah or David Taylor, and in the process discovering one of the most remarkable academics I think I've ever seen, frankly, one of the most remarkable people. And I said, it's sad to me to think that we will have a conversation where you agree to come on to my program to talk about how this David Taylor or Midegah is not who he claims to be. That's a wasted opportunity for me. And I happened to tell him, right as we got started in our hour-long recording, again, the whole thing is available on my channel here at Hellfire Agency. It's an episode called Heartlanders and Appropriation of Ojibwe Culture. And I was very nervous, and you'll probably see it in this. I listened to one of his audiobooks. I listened to several of his talks. He has this great show where he of shorts. He makes short videos. Oftentimes with his wife or one of his kids or somebody from his community there at Bemidji State University and or among Ojibwe people, where he mentions a word of the day. He has an Ojibwe word of the day where you can learn to speak Ojibwe. Super impressed with this guy. Super impressed. And I don't think in fact, just in the interest of time, I am going to skip to the end of this here, so you're not going to see. I highly recommend that you watch the whole interview. But I told him, I said, look, I started out talking to you about Mormonism and about this guy, Midegah, and asking you if you knew who he was, if you could validate whether or not this Midegah guy really is a chief, whether or not he really is in the community. And he had said, frankly, I don't know who this person is. And he happened to mention, he's like, if he is Mormon and claims that the Book of Mormon in its history is true, I don't care to have to correct the record on this, but it's obviously not true. And I happened to mention to throw him again some of these Zion Media clips, and that was where he said, "I'll give you an hour." And I said, he's like, this has to be just quickly correct the record, and say this man does not speak for the Ojibwe community. He does not speak for our people. He does not speak for indigenous peoples when he speaks about this. And I said, I promise you, I will give you every chance to speak and to say your piece, and to say what you felt was true. Again, huge respect for this man. After it was done, he said to me, "That was a great interview. Please send me the link as soon as you can. I would like to share it with some people." So that was the conversation I had with Dr. Troyer, in the which most of the conversation you're going to see, I would say, probably, or at least half of the conversation, is me asking him questions about the Church of Korihor. Well, for the benefit of the Church of Korihor, again, we're a spiritual community for godless people, atheists, and agnostics, and nuns. That's nuns with an O, not with a U. Because we are looking to understand better what spiritual development means for people who are not people of faith. And I told him that just before we went live or before we recorded this conversation. He said, "Oh, really? Interesting." And he said, "Well, I'm not sure that I can give you anything useful, but I'm willing to answer anything you have, any questions you may happen to have." And I got such incredible insight from this person. It's why it's just devastating to me to have to skip to the end of it. There's about 20 minutes I've clipped out here, a little over 20 minutes, and we're just going to skip to the end, where I did a kind of lightning round, basically asking him about Midegah. I just want to say, I would very much love to learn that what came out of this is that what came out of this episode for you is that you went and watched that hour-long episode called Heartlanders and the Appropriation of Ojibwe Culture, and learned something wise from this incredible person. I just want to clarify this. I just want to say this real quickly. Okay. So, because you're not going to get the chance to see it here. Anton Troyer is the son of a man who is a survivor of the Holocaust. He is the son of a woman who is Ojibwe. Because of the way that the tribal or nation laws there in the Ojibwe culture regarding blood quantum are written, he cannot, I think, legally claim. I think he cannot become a chief inside Ojibwe culture, and he cannot claim himself, I believe, as part of the Ojibwe nation or tribe. I'm not really sure. I'm not great about that part. In the registry of the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and yet he is a man who grew up very conflicted. His mother was an attorney who raised them in a home with no running water, with no indoor plumbing, in this on the reservation in the Great Lakes area. And raised them with traditional Ojibwe values and culture together with their father, who is Jewish, and he grew up kind of embarrassed. He tells the story of his heritage. And he tells a story in his book about how he had his hair long, as is traditional, and that was of no consequence when he was on the reservation. But when his mother would take them into town during the school year, where she worked in Washington, D.C., the kids would pick on him, and even his teachers would pick on him. He even tells a story of how at one point his teacher had him put on some blush and lipstick and put on a dress, when kind of teasing him about his long hair, and there's some real pain in there in his story. And but then he tells in his story about how he he was accepted into Princeton. And when he went to Princeton, he more or less was. Let me just finish that real quickly. That's when the first time he went to his mother and asked her if he could get a haircut. And to her credit, she respected his, his response to being bullied, even by his teacher. Um, and even though it wasn't in keeping with their values, with tribal values, she let him cut his hair immediately. He tried to fit in as much as he could in American society. Then he went to Princeton and discovered that people at Princeton, the educated, in the Ivy League world, tended to think about his being native as being pretty cool. And it was there that he came to an awareness that he needed to reconnect spiritually and emotionally and traditionally with the tradition of his people, of his mother's people. It was also there that he wrote the story about how his father had escaped the Holocaust. And I thought, I still haven't had a chance to read all of that, but what I have read of it's pretty fascinating. But he went back to Bemidji State University in that area and went to finish his education there. And while he was there, he studied under an Ojibwe man, who was recording, who asked him, why is that I never hear you speaking in Ojibwe? We need to preserve the language of our people. And he was embarrassed to admit he didn't speak Ojibwe. And so he learned Ojibwe, worked with this man, with his professor. Unfortunately, his name escapes me off the top of my head. And this man told him, now that you're starting to pick up the language, I want you to help me in my project to audio record as many Ojibwe elders in the community telling their stories and telling the traditions and the oral traditions of our people, so that in Ojibwe, so that the culture is not lost and the language is not lost. And so we can raise up this next generation of Ojibwe youth speaking Ojibwe by learning Ojibwe traditions. And I just thought that was the most remarkable and wondrous story. By the way, the man you're about to see here not only went on and carried this tradition after his mentor passed, and continued to audio record the traditional stories of Ojibwe people, of Ojibwe elders in Ojibwe. He also developed a way of using the English phonetic alphabet, not the phonetic alphabet, the English alphabet, to write Ojibwe in a phonetic way, so that a written language system which didn't previously exist, in a way that people from America could read it and understand it and learn it. This guy is the guy who worked to create that written Ojibwe as a written language. And I mean, if it's not clear, just one of the most remarkable people I've ever met. This is me sadly having to grill him about Midegah and about Mormonism.
Aspect, because on my mother's side, I come from Pueblo Indians and from Aztec and Maya as a Latinx person, and our ancestry.
Now let me skip back over.
In my view, any assertion that the color of
the Nephites, who are the more righteous.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to lead into this. I'm actually going to go back a little bit here. We're going to go a little bit over the 2-hour mark. It's too good not to share a little more of this. We're going to talk a little bit about the claims that of Mormonism generally, and putting David Taylor kind of layered into it here. And a lot of this is going to be very sensitive, especially to people with indigenous ancestry. So just be advised.
And there are probably plenty of Christians who would love to believe that he was everywhere in different names.
Oh, now I'm going to go back and we're going to see this one. I had asked him, do you know of any stories in Ojibwe about a man named Jesus who was or could be construed as being the resurrected Jesus Christ? That's pretty central to to the claims of Midegah, that the Ojibwe know that the son of God's a man named Jesus, and that he came to this, he's the great peacemaker, came to this continent, and that, you know, he taught them all these sacred teachings. And a lot of people really started to get into Midegah's stuff because they believe this story. Oh my gosh, you know, they call him Jesus like we call him Jesus. And so I asked him, like, to the best of your knowledge, is this true?
Dispersal. You know, I've personally traveled to every single Ojibwe reservation in the United States and to many of the ones in Canada. I had a PhD in history. I've researched and recorded oral histories. There was a guy named William Warren who recorded Ojibwe oral histories in the middle of the 1800s, some amazing research he did. And never once was there ever a mention of Jesus appearing among the Ojibwe people. Jesus is a figure in Western religious tradition who appeared in those traditions a couple thousand years ago. And there are probably plenty of Christians who would love to believe that he was everywhere in different names, you know, but the historical record that I've seen does not support that.
Let's see here. I don't know how, so I'll leave it at this one for our last one, which is good because we were about out of time. I want to be respectful of your time and also show.
Blah, 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 blah. Get to it, Joe.
Oftentimes was, you know, this same explanation for how Black people, you know, come from one of the sons of Noah. It was Ham. And it was very similar, frankly, thing.
So the question here, and just skip ahead here, get around my hem-ha, is that the Book of Mormon says that the Lamanites, who are the ancestors of of Native Americans, or at least some Native Americans, depending on which time period you come from, had a skin of blackness put upon them, a dark skin placed upon them, or a dark mark of on them, so that they would be loathsome and undesirable to their Jewish cousins, the Nephites, who were white, apparently, in spite of the fact that that doesn't really conform with any interpretation of this ethnic group. So I happened to ask him about this. Let me see if I can cue this up. I had asked him, I brought in the fact that, you know, he and I are both from indigenous ancestry on at least one side. And, you know, my mother is Latinx. You know, I have a great grandmother who was a Pueblo Indian, and we had, you know, I have Aztec and Maya history, ancestry. And I even have apparently some Jewish ancestry. So if anybody has reason to claim that they are, you know, a Jew from Native history, a Native and a Jew, it would be me or Dr. Troyer. You know, and yet neither of us believe that. You know, so we would be people in a position similar to Midegah to say that we could, you know, speak for the truthfulness of the story that Lehi came over the ocean and came to the Americas, and that, you know, his children are the ancestors of the Native Americans, and neither of us believe that, and that's for good reason. But I am to ask him, you know, as a man who is the son of a survivor of the Holocaust and also of an indigenous woman, how do you feel about hearing this story that in the Book of Mormon, you and I are, your skin or my skin is described as being as something that that sets us apart as being loathsome and undesirable?
Historically or in a contemporary context is repugnant to my beliefs and common sense.
Let me go back
on
to
your
get
mother's
all of
side,
his answer.
May have been people placed with this kind of mark, Jewish people who were placed with this kind of mark to make them loathsome and undesirable.
Well, in my view, any assertion that the color of someone's skin somehow reflects the content of their character, historically or in a contemporary context, is repugnant to my beliefs and common sense. So, no, I repudiate that idea.
Cool. Well, that's the thing that really is alarming to me, Dr. Trey. And I'll wrap up with this, and of course, give you opportunity to say anything that's in your heart to say. But I'm sure that it's difficult to navigate in a space like in the Native space where there are people. There are a lot of Catholics, there are a lot of Christians, a lot of Protestants among indigenous peoples, of course. And it's difficult, I'm sure, to navigate their beliefs and be respectful of their belief, in spite of the fact that during the 19th century, especially with Mormonism and other groups, other churches, there was a lot of narrative of pushing this idea of civilizing Native people. And it bothers me that should live on, that tradition should live on in modern religion, and trying to instruct Native people on who they are, what their origins are, what your origins are, to some aspect, because on my mother's side, I come from Pueblo Indians and from Aztec and Maya as a Latinx person. And our ancestry, to continue this narrative of instructing people on what their origins are and pushing this narrative of the Book of Mormon, it crosses the line, I think, from this is a statement of faith to this is cultural appropriation and a tool of oppression that really doesn't belong, I feel, as you have said, in a modern context where it's not useful, it's not helpful, and frankly, it's offensive. Is that aligned with your thoughts, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. First of all, anyone who wants to instruct anyone on anything should know what they are talking about. Otherwise, if you don't know, then don't instruct. And the idea that the color of my skin reflects the content of my character is offensive. And it is also easily disproven and objectively incorrect. So anyone instructing me that, or instructing anyone else in the world that, does not know what they're talking about and should stop instructing. And obviously, the fault lines of race and religion have converged at different times in history. Initially, the thinking about the divine right of kings after Constantine's efforts to convert the pagan kings of Europe into the Christian kings of Europe, the language shift from the divine right of kings to the divine right of Christian kings. And that Christian kings only were preordained by God to rule and all others to serve. And it created the doctrine of discovery and an enabling mechanism for European countries and the vassals of their monarchs to go across the ocean, plant a flag, and say, we own this land and all these people. And did so much harm. And while it is true that humans have been hard on each other in all parts of the world, the colonial kind of being hard on people was different, because instead of fighting over resources, it was saying, you cannot worship God the way you do. You have to do that the way I do. You can't speak the language you speak. You have to speak our language. And if you do not change your entire life and culture to align with and be subordinate to mine, then you don't even have a right to exist. So we should not give that truly oppressive way of looking at things power. And it does not, even deserve the rebuttal, because it is so silly And the only reason I'd even give it my time even for this is like, because we're still running into this stuff and people are still trying to use it to bludgeon us and to hurt us. And so we do need to, provide people with some understanding so that they can decenter that stuff. And I mean, I think that's really critical for everybody of all walks of life. And I would never, run someone down for their religious beliefs. But if you love your church, then the work is not evangelizing other people to your church, but talking to the people in your church to make it a kind, decent, welcoming place that actually says things that are true.
I love that so much.
Sorry. And there we'll conclude that. And in a moment, we'll do a closing hymn. And but as is very true to a Wednesday broadcast, I'm going to do a little talking. I just want to say, I hope you enjoyed that. I agree. We get good guests at the Church of Korihor and Hellfire Agency. I just want to say this before we wrap up, and I want to say it early in case David Taylor sees this and is still watching. Do you now want to sue me? I wish you wouldn't. Church of Korihor doesn't have a lot of money. And I didn't do any of this to defame you or to try and shame you. All the things that I've shown here are things that you put into the world. And if you are communicating these ideas and thoughts and feelings and they feel shameful to you now, maybe you shouldn't have said that. This is the part where I am gonna offer my opinion. This is all for social commentary, so here's my social commentary. David Taylor, you have been called a Samuel the Lamanite figure, and maybe you took some pride in that at some point. It seems to me you have. Maybe I'm wrong. And you are welcome, and I would invite you, before you start threatening lawsuits, come on the show. Contact me. I'm happy to talk to you. We can record an episode. We can go live. Let's talk it out. I'm a respectful host. I've had Mormons on my program. I talked to a young Mormon theology student a few weeks ago on my show. I've had Jacob Hansen on my show. In fact, it was the first interview I had. I've had people I disagree with, people who have called me out and said that I was, a godless whore for, I'll take it, and I'll take it respectfully. If you'll try to be respectful of me, I will try to be respectful of you. But I have to tell you that I have said, and even said about Seth over at Rise Zion, I mentioned this earlier, the doctrine, the thing that I wish more Mormons would appreciate here is that the doctrine that the Lamanites would blossom as the rose is genocidal. It may feel like just a doctrinal idea taught by the Book of Mormon. It is genocidal. It is genocide. It is meant to take a group of people and erase their indigenous heritage and instruct their children, instruct generations in a way that misinforms who they are. And Samuel the Lamanite, I think, is perhaps the most shameful character in that particular aspect of the Book of Mormon story. In the Book of Mormon, there's a character named Samuel the Lamanite, who is a prophet who's supposed to be a Lamanite with dark skin. And in spite of the fact that he has dark skin and that he is from this side of the Nephite Lamanite huge family tree, still never proven to exist anywhere, by the way. And they've had every opportunity. That he was nonetheless converted to the cause of Jesus Christ before Jesus was born, and prophesied the forthcoming soon of Christ in the Americas in his resurrected form, but his fair complected cousins, the Nephites, in spite of the fact that they are supposed to be white and therefore good, were evil, had descended into moral chaos and moral evil, and so even he had to wind up standing upon a wall of a Nephite city, where they then loosed arrows at him for preaching to them that Christ would come. Which, again, this was going back to the conflict with Korihor. Don't have time to get into that, sadly. And yet, even though they launched arrows at him, they could not hurt him, and the arrows went right through him, in spite of the fact that they could not explain how it was that the arrows did not hurt him. Set aside the stories about, George Washington and more or less the same thing happening with his uniform, and setting aside any of the many stories about how the story of the Lamanites seem to have come from mound builders in the region, or, stories from Captain Kidd, books or whatever. Okay. The very fact that it's not just the fact that this is a fictional story that really is upsetting. It's the fact that it is a fictional story that, in the tradition of the doctrine of discovery, that in the tradition of the Trail of Tears, that in the tradition of the Monroe Doctrine, was meant to prophesy and manifest destiny, more importantly than that, is meant to instruct peoples who have lived upon these continents for tens of thousands of years, in some cases, and that their origin is the origin of their ancestors is not only what their traditions tell, but it's also not what science and academia tell. It is instead something that was told in a book that attributed their or our race, our ethnic group, our appearance, and our future and our value to the moral judgments of a religious group that never was here upon this continent. And to do that and try and sell that Samuel the Lamanite narrative under your name or anyone else's, and claim that it is the testimony of indigenous peoples without proof, and in a way that degrades and insults indigenous people, is not standing up for your indigenous heritage or mine or Dr. Troyer's or anybody else's. It is in fact insulting. It is in fact oppressive, and it is entirely antithetical to everything that you claim to do when you stand up and you start ranting either at Shane Baldwin and the people at Zion Media, whether you start ranting at the Mormons and the LDS Church mainstream, or the Bickertonites, or Steve Pinecker, or to Rise Zion, Seth over there at Rise Zion, whether you start ranting and raving at other people, saying, why don't you recognize our nations? Why don't you recognize our treaties, which are good points? And saying, why don't you recognize our languages? Why are you trying to erase us? Which is a good point. But for all the indigenous people I know out there, and speaking on my own behalf because I'm not authorized to speak on somebody else's, but I think I made a good case here with the interview that I did with Dr. Troyer, that to say that in conjunction with a belief in a mission that you are here to save indigenous peoples from themselves is racist. And I don't care that that's against your own people. It's racist. It's wrong. It's a call to genocide. And I rebuke you for it. I think that you need to stand up for the truth. Now that those are hard words, but it's my opinion and it's what I think. And hopefully I still have some freedom of speech in this country anymore. I will but I wanted to say that, and just to wrap it up here again with the invitation that you're welcome to call me. You're welcome to cuss me out, you threaten me, yell at me, whatever you want to do, okay? I would ask you, let me do it in a way that it can be recorded. I promise you I won't record it without your permission. I promise you I won't broadcast it without your permission. And but I'd rather we talk about it. And even if I just have to sit here and listen to you berate me, I'll take it. Okay. But I want you to be a part of the conversation. And David Taylor, Mr. Taylor, Brother Taylor, whatever you prefer. I just won't call you Midegah anymore. I don't know. I don't know where that name is. I don't know how it relates to you. You and I had a conversation, I think, either that or somebody who was using your identity or your name by a chat once upon a time. And I wanted to let you know, I thought that that was a respectful exchange. And it encouraged me to believe that you can be a respectful person. I had made a comment on one of your sermons you gave. I give sermons also, godless sermons. And you gave this sermon, and I happened to mention in the comments, he's always preaching about himself. He's always preaching about himself. And that is still my criticism of things that you are still doing. However, I do think that I have seen, at least in the blog posts on this church, I don't know if this church that you started, the remnant branch or whatever it is, I'm sorry, I don't know it off the top of my head. I read some of your posts on there, and I said, maybe he's trying. I would encourage you to open a dialogue with me or with somebody. You said you happened to respond to me and say, what do you think I should preach on? Because you were preaching out of the Book of Mormon. I think you should do a lot less of that if that's not clear. And I said anxiety. I'm not here to toot my own horn on this, but having had a chance to think about how I had finally had an opportunity to speak to you after having attempted several times to contact you through Zion Media, tried to contact you through, I happened to mention to Steve Pinecker, if you do talk to him, you might mention that I want to interview him and I want to talk to him, just have it out and just, air the laundry and just get it out there where everybody can see. We finally had a conversation with you, and I the more I think about it, the more I double down on this answer. For your people, for my people, for these people, for human beings, I cannot stress enough that we all suffer. It's the one thing that Siddhartha got right more than anything else. The first noble truth of Buddhism was that all that is born suffers. I testify to that personally. I know I do. I know my family does. I know the people in my community do, including indigenous people from my area where I grew up and from my genetic line. I have seen suffering on a grand scale. I've seen it on 3 continents. I have seen suffering in Salt Lake City, while Mormons walk right past it, living on the streets, walking right past me as I am out there working among unsheltered people. And I think to myself, now that I have tried to become a better human being, that we could do better. And we should spend less time preaching to each other about such silly and petty ideas as what is a woman, or what is, what does, why do people have to be disrespectful and use words that hurt people's feelings and things like that. I am much more concerned with this question. Are you adding to or taking away from the extremely difficult circumstances of the community that you are in? And how, if you must tell a lie, if you must say something that is not true, like the stories from the Book of Mormon, can it at least be without malice towards people who are suffering? And can you use your opportunity, your platform, to get honest and tell some truth for a change? This conversation I had with Dr. Trera, he said something very profound. You heard a variation of it right there. He said, in indigenous communities, we have a saying: he who knows teaches, and he who does not know should not teach. This is a lie. Not just your part in it. That's such a small part of that lie, that you are called of God to speak. Well, you're welcome to tell me I'm wrong. And maybe I am wrong, but I'm pretty sure I'm not. I'd love to hear the argument against it. But this is wrong. I know that. And to perpetuate this colonizer mentality is, I think, the main reason why you need to stop representing yourself this way. You need to stop representing the Book of Mormon as true, and you need to stop representing yourself as if you speak for indigenous peoples when you speak such racist hate towards us. Amen. That was hard, and I stand by it. You're welcome to contact me, and yeah, and anybody who wants to get this to David Taylor or anybody else, you're welcome to do so. And yeah, unfortunately, we didn't get to talk a lot about the actual Book of Mormon today, but I hope to do that in the future in an episode. I hope that we could do it in a way that's a lot more fun in the future. But I thought this was good. I thought this was a good opportunity. I'm going to go ahead and close this up so that we don't stretch on to a third hour. If the Mormons can get in and out of their services in 2 hours, we can too. But I want to share with you guys a special hymn that I have been listening to on a daily basis here that has been very good for me. If you guys don't know, we're the Church of Korihor, spiritual community for godless people. And yes, we have hymns. And this one has been the one that's been really lately has been touching my heart. It is a new one, and it is called Look Up. Until I see you again, my friends, flash bright.
Up here, looking down on you, I wish you could see our oasis so blue. We were all born here, unsure what that means. Our petty borders and wars don't mean a damn thing. A hateful world can feel so crowded now that I'm up here all alone. I wish you all could see you've forgotten your home. Look up, these stars are just the sea. Look up, stay the course with me. Look up, every river, every creature running wild, born our sacred mother's child. This place is our only home. Look up, you are not alone. Lights below, can you look above? Every single heart yearns to be loved. One thing This is